The Axeman of New Orleans, a tale of mystery and terror. Welcome to Whispers After Dark, the place where eerie tales come to life. The story you're about to hear takes place in the early 1900s, a time of intrigue and mystery in the heart of New Orleans, Louisiana. It's the tale of a killer who slipped through the shadows, haunting the city's streets and leaving behind a trail of terror. This is the story of the Axeman of New Orleans, a name that still chills the bones of those who know it. But first, hit that like button and subscribe. Tap the notification button so you won't miss a single episode. Now let's get on with our story. In the spring of 1918, a brutal crime spree began that would paralyze the city with fear. At night, in the still of the dark, the Axeman would strike, leaving bloodshed and horror in his wake. The killer's weapon of choice was a simple axe, but his signature left an unsettling mark on New Orleans residents. The first of these terrifying murders occurred on May 23, 1918, when a couple named Joseph and Catherine Maggio were found hacked to death in their home, their skulls crushed and their bodies mutilated. But it didn't stop there. Over the following months, more families fell victim to the Axeman. Each attack became more brazen, with no clear pattern, yet one thing remained the same: the killer's chilling methods. No one knew who the Axeman was or what drove him, but one thing was clear: he had turned New Orleans into his personal hunting ground. As the victims' families mourned and the city grew more fearful, a letter arrived, one that would add another layer of mystery to the enigma of the Axeman. Who was behind these horrific acts? Was it madness, revenge, or something more sinister at play? The nightmare began on the evening of May 23, 1918. Joseph and Catherine Maggio, an Italian-American couple living in the lower 9th Ward of New Orleans, were quietly going about their evening, unaware that death was watching from the shadows. Their home, located above their small grocery store, was supposed to be a place of comfort, but that night it became a scene of unspeakable horror. As the clock struck midnight, the Axeman, unseen and unheard, slipped into their home. He wielded a heavy axe, using it to smash through their skulls with brutal force. The couple was found the next morning by relatives, their bodies left in a gruesome display. The police arrived quickly, but there were few clues. The weapon, a bloodied axe, had been left behind, as if to taunt investigators. A razor, later traced to a local barber, was also found at the scene. Yet no fingerprints, no footprints, nothing led to the identity of the monster who had done this. There was no sign of a struggle. The door to their home had been left unlocked and their belongings undisturbed. It was as if the killer had simply walked in, familiar, almost as if he knew his victims. What made this case so strange was the lack of clear motive. There was no robbery, no forced entry, just the savage killings of two innocent people. Police could find no clue to lead them to the identity of the killer, and it appeared the Axeman had vanished as quickly as he arrived. In the following weeks, fear began to grip New Orleans like a tightening vice. The city had just experienced its first murder by the Axeman, but it would not be the last. The killer had shown no remorse, and his violence was only just beginning. Over the next few months, similar murders would follow, each one chillingly similar to the last. It was as though the killer had a method, a macabre ritual he was following. Each crime involved a couple. Victims were almost always Italian grocers. Each scene featured the same horrifying weapon, an axe. In some cases, the Axeman would also leave behind a telltale mark, an open window. The killer seemed to prefer entering his victims' homes through unlocked doors or windows, always sneaking in when they least expected it. On June 27, 1918, another Italian grocer, Louis Bassumer, and his mistress, Harriet Lowe, were found clinging to life in their shop. Their skulls had been fractured by an axe, yet somehow they survived. Harriet, however, would later succumb to her injuries, and in her final moments, she claimed Bassumer himself was the attacker. The police, desperate for answers, arrested him, but the killings continued, proving he was not the Axeman. By July, the Axeman's spree had claimed several more victims, including the brutal murders of a family, the Andre family, and the more infamous attack on the Cortimiglia family. In each case, the violence was swift, merciless, and mysterious. No one knew how he chose his victims, and the fear only grew. As the months passed, the fear intensified. By August, another attack shook the city. Anna Schneider, a pregnant woman, was found brutally wounded in her bedroom, her face smashed beyond recognition. Miraculously, she survived and even gave birth to a healthy child weeks later. But still, the Axemen remained free, an unstoppable force that terrorized the city. By 1919, the terror reached its peak. More families were slaughtered. The randomness of the killings left no one feeling safe. Was he a madman, a spirit, a killer hiding in plain sight? No one knew. But soon, the Axeman himself would speak, sending a message that would forever haunt the streets of New Orleans. In the midst of the terror, a mysterious letter appeared that would send a shiver down the spines of everyone in New Orleans. The letter, which was sent to the New Orleans Times-Picayune newspaper on March 13, 1919, contained a chilling message. It was written by the Axeman himself, and in it, he revealed his next plan, to kill again. The letter read in part, "I am very fond of jazz music. I swear to God that I will pass over New Orleans if a jazz band plays at least one song in any given bar. The night will be the night of my last attack if you heed my demand." This bizarre demand led to a wave of uncertainty throughout the city. Bars and clubs responded by playing jazz music, hoping to appease the killer. For a time, there was a brief sense of calm, but it wouldn't last long. Despite the music, the killings resumed. It was as if the Axeman was taunting the city, mocking their fear. Despite the ominous letter, the Axeman's reign of terror eventually came to an end, though no one knows exactly why. After a final attack in October 1919, the killings suddenly stopped. The city was left in confusion, and the killer seemed to vanish without a trace. Theories abound as to why the Axeman stopped. Some believe that he was killed or imprisoned, while others think he simply grew tired of his murderous spree. What is certain is that the killer was never caught, and the mystery remains unsolved to this day. The city of New Orleans slowly returned to normal, but the memory of the Axeman lingered in the minds of those who lived through it. To this day, the identity of the Axeman remains one of New Orleans' most infamous mysteries. Many theories have been proposed about who he might have been. Some suggest that he was a serial killer, a lone man driven by madness or vengeance. Others believe the killings were the work of a group of people, or perhaps even a copycat killer inspired by earlier murders. One popular theory points to a man named James S. DeWitt, a New Orleans resident with a troubled past. However, there is no concrete evidence linking him to the crimes, and many of the theories remain speculative at best. Despite the lack of closure, the Axeman's legacy has endured. He remains one of the most terrifying figures in the city's history, and his story continues to fascinate and horrify those who are brave enough to delve into the dark heart of New Orleans. Although the murders stopped more than a century ago, the legend of the Axeman still echoes through New Orleans. His terror left a permanent mark on the city, and his story has been passed down through the generations. Today, the tale of the Axeman is still told, both as a cautionary tale and as a piece of history that continues to captivate. Was the Axeman a man driven by madness? A ghostly figure who walked the streets of New Orleans in the dead of night? Or perhaps he was something far darker than any of us could imagine, a mystery that remains, a question unanswered. One thing is certain, the Axeman of New Orleans will never be forgotten. They say when the Bone Reaper walks, the living tremble, his axe thirsts for souls, and the night is his to claim. Once, he was the Axeman of New Orleans, a man whose crimes painted the streets red, But vengeance is a cruel mistress, and a voodoo curse bound him to the darkness forever. Now a hollow specter of bone and rage, he hunts beneath the moon, searching for those who stray too far into the night. Tonight our story is one that lingers in the damp air of New Orleans, carried in whispers through the streets when the fog rolls in thick. A story of a man who became something far worse than a murderer, something cursed to walk the night forever. It began in the 1920s when jazz was king and the city pulsed with life. In the heart of the French Quarter lived a man named Silas Leroux, a bitter, angry soul who believed the world had cheated him. He drank too much, gambled even more, and when he lost, which was often, he took his rage out on those who had nothing to do with his misfortune. It was a dark, foggy night when Silas made his way through the bayou to the home of Mama Celeste, a voodoo priestess both revered and feared throughout the city. His axe, still slick with the blood of his last victim, gleamed under the pale moonlight. The metallic scent clung to him, mixing with the damp, heavy air. His heart pounded, not with fear, but with the thrill of what was to come. He sought power, wealth, a name that would echo through the streets of New Orleans long after he was dead and buried. The moment he stepped into her candlelit room, she was waiting. The air was thick with the scent of strange herbs, laced with something ancient and knowing. Shadows flickered against the walls, stretching and shifting as if listening. Mama Celeste's dark eyes bore into him, unflinching. "I have seen you in my bones, Silas Leroux, and I have seen your desires. Be careful what you ask for I have seen your future. I will grant only one." Silas scoffed, dragging the edge of his sleeve across his axe blade, smearing blood into the fabric. His lips curled into a grin. "Then give me fame." He knew that with fame came power, and with power came wealth. Mama Celeste did not smile. She did not waver. "I will grant your wish, Silas Leroux." Her voice was a whisper, yet it rumbled through the room. "Wealth you will never have, but the city will tremble at the mention of your name." The smile faltered on his lips. For the first time, something cold prickled his heart, sharp like a heated blade. His fingers curled tighter around the axe, and a tremor ran through him. Mama Celeste's lips moved in a language not meant for mortal tongues. The candle flames twisted unnaturally, their light casting long, writhing shadows. A wind howled through the closed windows. The walls groaned. A searing pain tore through Silas's chest. He fell to his knees with a strangled gasp, clutching at his heart as if he could hold it together. His breath came in ragged, desperate gulps. The room pulsed, bending, warping, reality itself shifting around him. His flesh shrank, blackened and peeled away. His bones gleamed under the flickering candlelight, stripped of everything that made him human. His hands curled around his weapon, now fused to him, as though it had always been a part of his very being. "You thirst for blood, so blood shall bind you," Mama Celeste whispered. "You shall walk these streets when the sun sets, seeking what you cannot find. But when the jazz plays, you will remember, and you will know regret. The city will know your name, Bone Reaper." Silas staggered to his feet. No longer a man, but a hollow thing, his skeletal fingers gripping an axe that had become an extension of his cursed soul. As he staggered into the darkness, Mama Celeste's laugh echoed through the swamp. New Orleans, 1927. The night was thick with humidity, and the distant glow of a street lamp made the fog shimmer with an unearthly hue. The scent of rain clung to the air as Henry Duval stumbled through a narrow alley off Bourbon Street. The lingering echoes of jazz from the club where he worked still thrummed in his ears, but now, in the silence between the buildings, there was only the sound of his own breath and the scrape of something dragging against brick, a quiet, distant shuffle of feet. Henry froze and glanced over his shoulder. The alley was empty, wasn't it? The gaslight above flickered. The shadows stretched unnaturally long. Then came the sound again, a slow, deliberate scrape, 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 metal against stone. His heart pounded as he turned, and there, at the mouth of the alley, stood a figure cloaked in darkness. The glow of the gaslight caught on something gleaming in its bony grip. An axe. Henry didn't wait to see more. He turned and ran, feet slapping against the wet pavement, breath hitching as he reached the next street. But he couldn't outrun the sound, the relentless scrape of metal on cobblestone. Suddenly, the doors of a jazz club swung open, spilling music into the night. And just like that, the scraping stopped. A laugh floated through the fog, low and chilling. Barely breathing, Henry dared to glance over his shoulder. The alley was empty once more. No laughter, no scraping, just the music, its slow, haunting notes filling his chest with dread. He had heard the stories, the phantom that locals called the Bone Reaper, who walked the streets of New Orleans on nights when moonlight pierced the fog. Henry turned and ran. The mist closed around him, swirling, twisting, disorienting. His foot caught on uneven stone and he stumbled, crashing onto the cobblestones beneath a flickering street lamp. Cold dampness seeped through his clothes. Laughter echoed in his ears, the scrape of metal on stone. The last thing he saw was the figure towering above him, hollow eyes staring down at him, and the blade of an axe gripped in a skeletal hand. By morning, a grocer found his body sprawled on the steps of his store. The flickering light above cast eerie shadows over the scene. Henry's chest cleaved open, his blood pooling into the cracks of the cobblestone pavement. St. Louis Cemetery, November 1st, 1986, New Orleans. Claire LeBeau had never believed in ghost stories. Growing up, she had heard whispers of the Bone Reaper haunting St. Louis Cemetery. Only once did she dare sneak inside its gate. In the dim moonlight, she felt as though she were being watched. Then came a whisper in the dark, "I see you." She ran. For years she chased tales of superstition and the paranormal, eager to expose myths for what they were. She needed to disprove the nightmares of the Bone Reaper that had haunted her dreams. Tonight, she had returned to the cemetery to investigate recent sightings of the Bone Reaper. The metal gate creaked loudly as she pushed it open and stepped inside and took her first step. Her notepad was clutched tightly in one hand. Her small Instamatic camera hung from its strap around her neck. The moon hung low, silver light casting jagged shadows over the mausoleums. Claire stepped carefully over the cracked pathway that wound through the cemetery like a maze. The ancient tombs stood hauntingly beautiful in the darkness. The gravestone statues seemed to move and shift in an unearthly manner. A winged shadow loomed before her. She caught her breath, her pulse hammering in her ears. The clouds shifted, and moonlight spilled over the carved figure of an angel marking a grave. Claire exhaled slowly. Then, the air shifted. The warmth of the night bled away, replaced by a sudden bone-deep chill. Fog curled through the cemetery, thick and suffocating. A rustling came from behind a grave, something or someone moving in the darkness. Claire swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her ears as she strained to listen for movement. Silence. Then, a low creak, a scraping sound, metallic, echoing off the broken stone. Her flashlight flickered as she turned toward the source. The old, rusted gate was swinging open. Beyond it stood a figure, tall, dark, hollow eyes glowing like embers. A tattered suit clung to its skeletal frame, a dark hat obscuring its face, and in its grip an axe, catching the moonlight like the gleam of a wolf's eye. Claire's breath hitched. She stepped backward, her heart beat a thunderous drum in her chest. She slowly lifted her camera. She didn't dare look through the viewfinder, just pointed and clicked. The camera whirred, and the instant photo dropped at her feet. Then, faint but unmistakable, the sound of a trumpet drifted from the quarter, a slow, mournful jazz melody floating over the tombs. The figure twitched. A shudder passed through its bony form, and then, as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone, vanished into the shadows. Claire fled. The next day, despite every instinct screaming at her to stay away, she returned. When she found the photo, it was resting on the granite base beside the angel's feet. With trembling fingers, she reached for it, then jerked her hand back. A face of bone grinned back at her, and scrawled in blood across the photo were the words, "I see you." Mardi Gras, the Roosevelt Hotel. 15 years later, the hotel room door clicked shut, sealing out the distant echoes of Mardi Gras revelry. The night had been a blur of music, masks, and mystery, and now she stood in the dim glow of the bedside lamp, watching the stranger who had danced with her through the night. His dark coat hung on his tall frame, his hat casting a shadow over his sharp features. "You never did tell me your name," she said, kicking off her heels. The man, tall, elegant in his dark coat and hat, tilted his head slightly. "You already know it." Her smile faltered. Something about his voice. It was the sound of rust scraping metal, of wind moaning through tombs. The room turned cold. Too cold. The music in the streets outside blocked out by the sound of her own heartbeat. For a moment she stopped breathing. A metallic scent curled into the air. His voice was a rasp of wind through dead branches when he whispered her name. He lifted his hand and she saw the axe, rusted and pitted, fused to the bones of his hand. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears as he slowly raised his head. In the dim light, his hollow sockets burned with an unnatural glow. She heard his slow hiss of breath. Fear turned to sheer terror when he spoke. "I see you." The whisper slithered through the room as the lights flickered, then died. Her scream never left her lips. Are these stories about the Bone Reaper truth or legend? What do you think? Maybe the Bone Reaper still roams the cemetery of New Orleans, or maybe the Bone Reaper is a creature of the night that I created. Legends and truth are often hard to separate, because every legend begins somewhere with something. Every myth has a beginning. Every whispered tale is born from something. And the Bone Reaper, he was created from my own imagination. The Axeman of New Orleans he was born from? He existed, but his name wasn't Silas LaRue. Whatever his name, he was a madman who wielded an axe and rained terror over New Orleans in the early 1900s. You can find his story in our channel after you subscribe, and then click the link in the video description below. Maybe the Bone Reaper really is out there, watching, waiting. And if you are in New Orleans and you hear the sound of metal on stone, run. Thanks for watching this episode of Whispers After Dark. If you enjoyed this chilling tale, please explore the other chilling tales on the channel. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Do you think there's truth to the legends? And be sure to join me next time for another eerie journey into the unknown. Until then, stay curious, stay cautious, and beware of the whispers after dark.